Welcome to the Heart of Dad podcast. Heart of Dad is a podcast for entrepreneurs who are passionate about their families and business and looking to find more clarity, more balance and more alignment in all areas of their life. Come and join the community at heartofdad.com or on Facebook at groups/Heart of Dad. This week on Heart of Dad, I'm interviewing Armando Cruz. Armando is a connoisseur of experiences, husband, father, adventurer, best-selling author, ultra-marathoner, lifestyle physical therapist, and legacy coach. So this week on Heart of Dad, I'm delighted to welcome Armando Cruz. Hi, Armando.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good. It's great to have you on the show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Last time we spoke, we had a great conversation. I'm looking forward to this one as well.
Yeah, me too. And of course, we're recording this just at the beginning of April now in 2020, and we're both living in a very different situation from where we were like 6 weeks ago when we spoke. The world has changed enormously, so we'll kind of weave that a little bit into our conversation, I'm sure, today as well, because it's impacting me as a dad, and I'm sure it's impacting you as a dad and as a business owner. So let's make sure we kind of cover that off as well.
Okay.
But yeah, just tell us a little bit about yourself, if you can, just as an intro.
Sure. I like to say that I am a connoisseur of experiences. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I've been married with my wife. We're going to be 14 years in December. And I have 3 kids. One is 11. My daughter is going to be 9 tomorrow of the day that we're recording this. And then my son is 5 years old, and my wife and I have been running our fitness and physical therapy practice for the past 13 years, and probably the past 7 years I've been also running my coaching business for married men entrepreneurs, and that pretty much like wraps up kind of the continuum of most of the stuff that I do. The big focus on the stuff that we end up doing is working with people in chronic pain, men or women that have been suffering, have seen people, still no results, and we've been able to eliminate their chronic pain in a fairly short amount of time and get them lasting results, which has been pretty amazing to get those kind of results and help them with lasting health. So I'm really excited about that. And in this day and age, in this world that we're living in, coronavirus world, it's become even that much more important since we've been doing it virtually for a while. And so it's great to be able to serve people now that feel trapped in their house to be able to get rid of pain.
Fantastic. I had that question immediately, actually, when you were talking about your longer business, the one you hold with your wife. So that was already an online business, was it?
No, so we had both branches.
We had both, right?
We had both. And so we still have both. The difference is that now the physical facility, they've closed it down. And as of right now, the earliest date we can go in is May 8th. So we're still looking at, and we've already been closed down for 3 weeks. So, right. We're going to have been closed down physically for probably at the end, 3 months, which is rough for any business.
Right. So how much of your revenue comes from your kind of physical space proportionately? I mean,
I would say probably 75%. That being said, we've been able to transition every single person to virtual. And in the process, I think we lost one person in the entire shift, which has been, God sent to
yeah, that's amazing that you've had that capacity. I think one of the interesting things in this pandemic has been how people have got very creative to shift their businesses online very quickly. But it sounds like you already had a foothold in that.
Correct.
Foothold in that space, which is great.
Correct.
Well, I'm curious. It sounds like you're getting enormous success with kind of pain management. How do you diagnose and treat pain over a screen? It's kind of sounds fascinating to me.
So first of all, it's understanding what pain is. Most people have a distorted feeling of pain as an attack towards you. And so people feel like they're often the word that comes to mind is that it's unfair and I am almost held hostage by my body. And in reality, what needs to be happening is understanding that you are in a relationship with your body. And if the way you feel is like you're being held hostage, that's a pretty turbulent relationship. So a lot of the work that we do is centered around understanding and educating our clients in what pain is and understanding and learning the language of the brain. So that now when they have pain, they understand what's going on. They ask better questions. And as a result, they take better actions that help support and give the brain the needs that it has, because pain happens in your brain, not at the source, right? Like that's where we feel it. Oh, my knee hurts. Oh, you say my knee hurts. But in reality, the brain is the one that interprets everything that's going on and then sends back the signal to have the knee hurt, if you want to say. And so I make the distinction between chronic pain and acute pain, right? Because if you were walking down the street and you got hit by a car, well, okay, your brain is interpreting it, but you physically got hit by a car. There's structural damage at that point that needs to heal. But very often the people that we end up seeing have been in pain for a year or more. They've seen other practitioners and they still have pain. And at that point, it's rarely the structural stuff that's keeping them there. It's understanding, how do I communicate the same way you would with your spouse? I mean, at this point, hopefully everyone is familiar with the book, The Love Languages, the 5 Love Languages, right? It's a fascinating book. It's a great book. And if you really put it to practice, you can now start serving and loving your spouse the way they want to be loved. Well, the same thing happens with the brain, is how do you show love to your brain the way it needs to be shown so that it can give you access to pain-free range of motion, to pain-free movement, to actual activation that allows you to do the things that you love. And that's kind of the context. So there's a lot of questioning, but then the same way, you and I are seeing each other on this Zoom call, we hop on a call, we do that. I have them do physical tests. The only thing I cannot do in this is me doing the physical work. And it actually helps. And the reason it helps is because very often when you put your hands on someone, it's easy to relinquish responsibility. They are fixing me. They have the magic touch, right? So all I have to do is show up and they'll do their thing, and then I can go on living my life. The problem with that is it's not a great long-term strategy. And what I found is with my virtual clients, it is much easier for them to take more responsibility and more ownership of everything because they don't have that crutch of me touching them. Right?
So, we're just picking up again. We had a little bit of problem with the audio, and I was just saying to Armando how it's amazing he's doing this work now in a remote way, and he was describing how, the only difference is that he can't physically be intervening with his clients, and that is fostering a greater independence. And I was reflecting how that's amazing, really, but there's also no choice, right? Because you are now physically separated.
Correct. And again, and that's kind of the silver lining in it. For so long, we've been conditioned to thinking that you have to be in the same place. And now it's really opening the doors. And now with this whole coronavirus thing, I think it's opening the doors for a lot of people. Just now the possibilities, whereas before they wouldn't even consider it. Like I have had clients now say, wow, so now when I go on vacation, when I go, like, I don't have to miss anything. Like I can now we can do it like this, which is great, because now just these are times that help create more clarity in the struggle, unfortunately. So it has to get worse often before it gets better. But I think on the other side of that, or let me rephrase that, whoever makes it on the other side of that ends up in a more clear, much better place.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Oh, that's amazing about this side of the business. But I'm also curious about your other strand of business. So you're coaching married men. And what took you into that space, Armando?
Oh, okay. For that, we got to rewind a little bit. For that, we got to rewind to about a good 7 years ago. I had gotten to a place. Maybe you can relate. Have you ever felt like that you've been striving for something, and when you achieve it, you get to this place and you're like, "Ooh, is that all there is?" And it shakes you a little bit, especially if you put everything into it. And about 7 years ago, that's what happened to me. I have a great relationship with my wife, great relationship with my kids. We have our needs met. We have a house, we have a car, we have a great business that we're serving people and helping people. But I felt like there was something missing. I felt like I was missing a level of fulfillment. And because of that, it actually made matters worse, because success became the prison. And that may seem kind of weird, but think about it for a second. Here's a guy, me, where from the outside, everything looks like it's going perfect. And now I'm having this internal struggle where I don't feel fulfilled the way I thought I should or would. And I felt like there was something more that I needed in my life. Not bigger house, more cars. It wasn't a things thing. It was more of a fulfillment thing. And the problem with that is that it really shook my identity. It's like, well, if I'm not fulfilled doing this, then what am I missing? Am I who I say I am? And so there was a big identity struggle. And who was I going to share this with? Because nobody's going to care. I mean, you're like, what? Oh, so you don't feel as fulfilled? Like everybody would kill for your life. Anybody would kill for your life, right? You have all these things. And I didn't fail to see that I was grateful for all these things, but I felt trapped. And whenever you feel trapped, now you got to either run or you got to fight. And for me, I kind of ran away and hid. I fell into a depression to the point where I almost bankrupted the business, to the point where it was obviously putting a strain on our marriage. It was putting a huge financial strain. And I remember around that time, I had a coach of mine that I had worked with in the past reach out, and he said, listen, I have this retreat in Thailand. I think you would really benefit from it. And I believed him. I agreed. And I remember going to my wife and talking with her. And this is my wife pregnant with our third child. Me almost bankrupting the business, or sending it in that direction if we continue in the way we're going. I'm sleeping 6 to 8 hours in the middle of the day because I have no desire to do anything. I don't know what to do. I feel lost. And I remember coming to my wife and telling her, look, there's this opportunity to go to this retreat. And I remember her asking me, do you think this can help? And I said, yes. There were two problems with that retreat. Number one was, like I mentioned, I was tanking the business. So I didn't have the money for it. And it was in Thailand. I'm in Florida, which is halfway across the world. The other problem was the retreat finishes a week before the due date, my wife's due date, which this is her third. And if you've ever had kids, each one can come earlier every single time that they come. So there's a chance I missed the birth of my third child. And I remember my wife looking at me and she's saying, and I describe this as one of the greatest acts of love and courage that I've experienced, because she looked at me and she said, if you think that this can help, then you need to do this. Not for you, but for us. Because I would rather you miss the birth of our child on this one day than miss the rest of our life because you're not the man, the husband, or the father I know you can be, because I can't help you anymore. And I was like a sucker punch to the gut. Like that really hit home. That was rough to hear those words from her, because I knew that I was not in a good place, but to actually hear it and then have her pregnant say, I would rather you leave me alone with the family, which is difficult because she's now running the household. She's running the business. And she has 2 other little kids. We have 2 other little kids, and she's pregnant. And who knows if she's going to go into labor before I get back. So the stakes were incredibly high. I eventually, we figured out, I go to Thailand. And I remember there being able to separate and have a completely different perspective on life just by the separation of getting out of my day-to-day life and being in a brand new place with somebody that can help guide you. And I remember going through it and I realized the work that I'm doing is extremely fulfilling. In fact, I love it. My clients are awesome. There's nothing wrong with that. I said, but there's another part that I'd like to go deeper. And that I started realizing that I could really help other men like myself who were family-centric, married men, entrepreneurs, that they were more family-centric than profit-centric. And it's not that they didn't make money. It was that if you had to weigh the two and I had to make the decision, do I work 5 extra hours and make this amount of money more, or do I take advantage of this opportunity to spend my time with my kids? They would have chosen the family, right? So it was a different mindset, right? Because I've been part of many masterminds. I've been a part of lots of groups, and there are plenty of the profit ones, and it's cool. It's just not me. So I knew that there were other men like me, and we're struggling because here you have these group of people, hard grinders, and everything revolves around that. And I realized I didn't relate to that. So I had to create my own way of doing things. And I'm sure that there were other men like that. And so while I was over there, I created the program I wish I had and could have gone through to help me gain more clarity and set up my business to amplify my family as opposed to detract and take away. And so that's where I created what I call the rich man experience. And rich is a redefinition of the word rich. It's an acronym for a values system. So this value system serves as a compass for how to show up and how to take action. And so rich stands for respected, inspired, connected, and happy. And so I use that value system as a compass to guide the men in the direction that they want, to help them create that legacy that inspires them. So I made it back. Well, let me say this part because I always forget to say this. I made it back, and 3 days later, my son was born. So I did not miss it. I did not miss the son, the birth of my child. And then I started calling other men that I knew that were kind of in a similar boat. Started working with them, and about 2 years into working with them, I realized, wait, this is something that more people need to hear and have access to, that don't necessarily aren't ready for coaching emotionally or financially, but still would like to conceptually start gaining some of this. So that's when I wrote The Legacy Code, my book. And it's kind of transitioned. It's kind of continued to progress from there.
Such an amazing story. Kind of definitely had tears in my eyes as I was listening to you. So I can certainly identify with so much of what you shared there. And I think there are those pivotal moments in our lives, aren't there, where kind of you have to face a truth that's awakening within you. And sometimes that manifests through depression or anxiety or a loss of identity, and something new emerges. And
Right.
I love how you describe that act of love from your wife as well. So that was an amazing thing to offer for you and your marriage, I guess, for the three of you and your kids.
Also, right. Thank you.
I mean, one question I had for you, Armando, I don't know if you're okay to sort of look at this, but, you know, I was wondering how the period when you were depressed, how that played out with your relationship with your kids, who I guess must have been around 6 and 4 at that time, if I'm kind of counting correctly, or a bit younger even.
Yeah, exactly. Probably, yeah, around that. 4, 6. There we go. Yeah, probably 5 and probably like 5 and 2.
5 and 2, right? So ages where, you know, my son is 5 years old at the time of the recording, and you know, it's a time of intense interaction with a parent, and a lot of emotional needs, and kind of a very tempestuous time emotionally for a child as well. And I'm just wondering, you know, and I've had my own experiences on and off with depression in my life, and know that it definitely impacts my capacity to connect with myself first and foremost, and then my capacity to connect with those around me. And I'm just wondering how that played out for you at the time.
Yeah, I think one of the things I want to be very clear about is when I use the word depression, I'm using it as in a less than state than my normal. I don't want to put up the front that says, you know, oh, like I have this clinical depression and I've been struggling with this for my entire life. That's not me. Mm-hmm. And I think it's an important part, because there are people that are like that. And that's a completely different journey than the one that I was on. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to diminish that by saying, oh, I did this and I was able to. You have to understand where you are in this.
Sure.
The depression came, I think, or that less than state of myself came because of that lack of, or that loss of identity, and then loss of almost hope, because I didn't see a way out. It was kind of like a trapped person. And that's one of the I guess the intentions of when you're in prison is they try to break your hope in some instances. And if once you lose hope, moving forward is very difficult. So I started losing hope, and as a result, that was directly proportional to my desire to do anything. And it affected everyone, because instead of being with them, I would just separate, and I would go to the room and I would disappear. Like I just had no desire to do anything, not be around people. I mean, I would go and see my clients and I would put up the happy face and do what I needed to do to get through it. And I enjoyed, like, the thing is that I enjoy connecting with people. So I still enjoyed that. But the second that I came away with that, because I knew that I didn't have to do that with my family, right? Because I didn't have to deliver a service. They would love me for who I am, which is something that tends to happen. Like if you look at most people's relationship when they're with clients versus with their family, they behave in a way that is often different. They're willing to give the family leftovers. Partly is because you're not paying attention to that. Part of it is like, oh yeah, because they'll love me no matter what. So I'll devote all my energy to behaving this way with my clients. And then when I get home, I'm like, so be, I have no desire to keep putting that face up, keep putting that front up. And so juggling that back and forth I realized, hey, I would put on the happy face for my clients and help them. And then I would get home and I would just be so drained that I'd be like, all right, I'm going to bed. I'm going to bed. That's what I would do.
So I think a lot of men, maybe kind of that crisis point you had is perhaps more extreme than some men would have experienced, and less extreme than others. I don't want to kind of relativize it, but I think it's an incredibly important point you're sharing about. And somebody else on the podcast has described it as not giving your family the last fruits of your energy, but giving your family the first fruits of your energy. And I think you're speaking to something very similar there. I'm curious to know, like, what have you seen, in your journey that has allowed you to recalibrate so that your family gets the best of you, in the same way that your clients get the best of you?
Right. I think it was Peter Drucker that said, if it doesn't get measured, it doesn't get improved. And so, paraphrasing, something like that, right? So one of the things is I schedule it, right? So I schedule it as one of the top things. I actually, you mind if I share kind of that whole priority scheduling process that I go through?
Yeah, go for it. I think it'd be fascinating for the people to hear. Yeah.
So I use a Post-it note. You guys have those there, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, Post-it. Okay. So it's a small little piece of paper, and I do that on purpose to have constraints. People sometimes shy away from constraints. Constraints constraints are the fastest way to speed and clarity. The more options you have, the more you got to think about, the slower that process, there's more you have to go through. So when you give yourself some constraints, it actually helps you to hyper focus. And so what I've done is I created what I call my big three. I decide the night before, what are the three most important things that if they got done, the day would be set, right? So I first schedule my me time. That's the first thing I do. I schedule, okay, when am I going to work out, meditate, do kind of my writing, my stuff. Then I schedule my family time. Okay, from this to this time, like no interruptions, this is when I'm doing family time. And it sounds like, well, I mean, this is your family. Shouldn't it be more organic? I was like, yes, but when you're juggling a lot of things, what I'm doing is creating those constraints that say nothing can interrupt this. And so that's the prioritization of that block of time for them. It's not that I won't be with them the other, but I know for a fact that I'll have that time. And then I schedule in my big three. And usually the big three is more work related or problem resolution kind of thing, something in the house that needs to get resolved, like whatever, if you got to do your taxes or something like that. Oh, I got to make sure that gets done today. So I book those, and then I book everything else around it. And what that ensures is, number one, I don't fall by the wayside, because if I'm not filling up my tank, I can't mentally, physically, and emotionally be in the best place for my family and for my clients. So I make sure that gets in there. And then the whole thing with the family, it allows us to put the family first. Doesn't mean it's the first thing that's going to happen. It's just, that it's going to happen.
Right.
And then from there, then put in those big three to make sure that the most important things get done as far as from your to-do list. And then after that, you can put in anything, because people sometimes, especially if you're a big list person, you probably like, there's no way. I got a million things on my list. I can't do three. And the way I like to, if you're that type of person, then I would, like, my wife is that kind of person. Like, she has a million things all the time. It's easier for me to like hyper focus, say these three, and I can let everything else go. I'd be like, okay, these are my three. I'm not worrying about anything else. She's constantly has a million other things on her list. So the way I like to say, if you're that type of person, is by completing your first three, you now have access to think about and look at the other ones. So it's kind of like if you're in a game and you kind of like unlock the next level, or unlock these new tools that you can now use. that's kind of it, right? Like you have to complete these first three. And then if you have more time in the day, you unlock the potential to be able to play around with the other things on your to-do list.
Nice. So I like the system. I suppose I have a question in my mind, which comes back to a comment you mentioned earlier about, I loved your vision with your Rich program, and you said it's for family-centric entrepreneurs, right? Which is a beautiful phrase. And I guess one of the things I've been exploring with other people and within myself is kind of it's a continuum, right? There's kind of, this is how I see it anyway. There's my kind of family life, and then there's my business. And there's this continuum, and my time is continually flexing between the two. But there are times when I feel like, for whatever reason, I'm pulled more towards the business side. Like
yes.
At this time of the pandemic, right? There's been a lot to do, and you've had to completely reconfigure your, your face-to-face business into an online business, even though you have the foundations there already, which is great. But for me also, it's opened up a whole set of challenges and opportunities, and my pull, because I'm, like we all are, I think, kind of naturally creative, has been to go, all right, I could do this, and I could do this, and I could do this. Right. So, how do you navigate that tension within yourself? Like, if you're family centric, what do you say to yourself about your business needs and how you figure those into your, your overall game plan for life?
Right. Sometimes there's maintenance involved, right? So you're not always growing. The idea is, this idea of, you got to grow and everything's got to be maximized. You don't play like that. One of the best examples that I've heard that I've really loved and taken to is a jazz quartet. If you're familiar with the jazz quartet,
sure.
You have 4 instruments, right? And they're all playing. But throughout any given song, there's an opportunity for the drummer to solo, right? Everyone else is still playing support. They're still playing the song. Drummer goes on, he does his thing. Then maybe the horn does his solo, and everyone else is supporting. And so, to your point, which I'm glad you brought up, because I think everyone, when somebody says this idea of, that work-life balance, the idea is, first of all, I hate the term, because there's nothing balanced about it.
Right.
In fact, if it's balanced, it doesn't move, right? It's homeostasis. Mm-hmm. And if it stays there, it eventually rots. It doesn't grow, right? So if you want the peaks and valleys, if you look at an an EKG, electrocardiogram, when you're flatlined, that means you're dead. You don't want to run your life flatlined because everything is so balanced. You want the ups and downs. That means there's life. And so when you're talking about your family and you feel like there's these moments where you're more pulled towards the business, that's okay. But what you now say is, okay, wait, how do I become intentional about some of the family time? It may just be 5 minutes, right? So a lot of times that's where the problem with balance comes in. It's like, wow, if I just spent 12 hours in the business, I don't have 12 hours for the kids because I got to sleep. They're asleep. So now what? Now there's guilt. Now instead of being focused on the stuff you got to do for your business, now you're kind of mentally playing that tug of war, and half your mind is with your family, half your mind is this. It's like, no, dive in, communicate with your spouse, communicate with your kids. Hey, there's a lot of stuff happening in the business. You're going to see daddy a little bit less, but at this time, we're going to spend some time together. I know it's not as much as we normally do, but I need to finish this. And then once I'm done, we'll be able to go and do this, right? So part of this is like with any relationship is being able to communicate through the ebbs and flows. That is where practicality and understanding the dynamic of the family and the marriage is important, is through that communication. And then have everyone on board. It's like, oh, okay, great. Everyone knows why we're doing this. So they're on board, right? Would they like me to be there? Yeah, of course. Would I want to be there during dinner? Of course. But there are nights that I haven't, especially with all this going on. we've had to kind of scramble and make some adjustments. And, you know, we've had to shoot, I don't know how many different videos, you know, just for our clients. And so that is not a normal thing. So we had to take a lot more time to get everything in order so that everything can continue to flow.
I think that's really sort of helpful to hear that explained, Armando, because I think many people listening would be wondering whether family centric has a restricts you from flexing in that way. The question that came up for me was like, does that communication and really kind of being proactive in the management of the situation, does it inoculate you against feelings of guilt when you're...
No. It doesn't, because at the end you still want to be there. But and it used to happen with me a lot more earlier on. I mean, I've been at this since I've been an entrepreneur for the past 15 years, since 2005. And I remember at the beginning, like when I say the beginning, when I got married, there was a big difference. It's like whenever I was at work, I was like, man, I would rather be with my wife. Like, I like her. I chose her. Like, I want to be with her. Right. And then when the kids came, whenever I was working, I was thinking, I want to go back to them. And when I was with them, my mind would go, I got to do all this stuff for work. And I could never find myself, you know, mentally and physically in the same place until I had to, you know, I have had my own coaches, my own masterminds that I've been a part of, and understanding the context of other people and the way they said it. And then when I heard that idea of the quartet and how the whole group plays, and there are times when, you know, business takes a solo, or your health takes a solo, or your family takes a solo, or, you know, whatever else is in there takes a solo, it doesn't mean the other ones stop, because everyone's still part of the band. We're all still playing to support that. The problem is that if you're in that same song and the drummer is 10 minutes in and he hasn't stopped soloing, now we got a problem, right? So there is a point where that threshold now crosses, where it's like, okay, we can only support up to so long. And then that's where the communication needs to happen between husband and wife first, because remember that you guys are the ones that you are the one that set the tone for the house. The kids don't run the house. So if you're not in the best place amongst each other, it's going to trickle down to them. So it's important for you guys to have that conversation. You guys to set what's that threshold, or even more importantly, because sometimes you don't know what you don't know yet. So how do you want me to communicate when I'm feeling you're reaching that threshold, so that we can have a conversation and pull back?
Have you got to that point where it's kind of tipped over, either for you or your wife, when you know you kind of put up your hands and go like, this is way out of kilter, like we need to put the brakes on here?
Yes, it has. Not often, but it has. And then it's kind of like, oh, okay. And sometimes it's my kids that'll call me out on it. I remember, and if you've never done this, now you have a 5-year-old, right? Right. You have a 5-year-old. The 5-year-old is already in a place that they can do it. I have asked as early as 2 or 3. I remember asking the kids one day, they were in the car, and you know, one of the rules that I have is the radio is never on in the car. Why? Because I have their captive attention. So it's like, okay, let's talk. What's going on? So that now we're having dialogue instead of being distracted, right? Because it's an opportunity where you can make it so that there's very little distraction. At home, it's much harder for both them and for myself. So I remember asking him, I said, what do you love doing with me? And so they each had their thing. Oh, I love this. I love it when you do this. So again, what I'm asking for, what's the recipe for success? And then I asked, which is a rough one to take, what do you wish daddy would do more with you? And then they would say, oh, read to me a little bit more. Or I wish you would, play with me a little bit more. I wish you would do. And it's like, oof, that's a really sobering to sit there. And now there are no distractions because you're in there. You're like, man, I can't go anywhere. I got to hear this. This is rough. This is rough. But if you take it in as an opportunity to make adjustments, now they're giving you the recipe for success, then now you know the actions to align with to make sure that they feel heard and feel supported and loved the way they need to at the moment.
Love that. I'm going to be trying it out in the next day or two. Real-time feedback. Yeah, that's brilliant. When we first met, we had a great chat, as you were saying earlier, and one of the stories that you told me, which I really loved and I wanted to bring out in today, is your relationship with your dad. I've been asking other men, about how their relationships with their dads have formed them as dads, for good or bad. And we've had a whole range of stories, as you can imagine, but that's what really stuck with me, the story of you and your relationship with your dad. So would you tell us a little bit about that, Armando, and how things are with your dad?
I am very, very blessed. My father, growing up, was my best friend. And not until I got married did that role get, passed on. And by the way, actually, and if I'm honest, it took a while, right? Because there was a transition period. It was hard. But I mean, I still consider him not just my dad, but like somebody who I trust and will consider as one of my best friends. He always said, he goes, you guys always say about me being a good father and kind of hanging out with you guys. He goes, what you didn't realize is that I got to grow up with you, because my parents had me when they were like 21, 22. They got married early, and within a year they had me. And they were figuring out life for themselves. And it was great because I'm the oldest of four. And because I was closer to my dad in age, and I was obviously the oldest first, I got to do more things. And my father, what I realized was he was a person of action. He was a person of his word. So if he said he was going to do something, he was going to do it. And he lived up to that all the time. And when he would say, a big one for me was in the realm of training. If it wasn't for my dad, I probably would be overweight and probably not healthy, because my natural tendency was not to do things that were hard, was not to do things that got me uncomfortable. But he would always say, hey, want to go for a run? And I'm talking about 5:30, 6 a.m. in the morning. And he'd knock on the door. He goes, hey, you awake? You want to go for a run? I'm like, no, I want to go to sleep. And it would be like his persistence. It was like what is it, Chinese water torture of the drops falling on your head? That is the epitome of my father. He never said that I had to do anything. It was just his persistence would wear you down. And eventually it'd be one day, okay, fine, you've woken me up for the past 90 days. Okay, I'll go. And finally you would go, and it was like, oh, it wasn't that bad. And the next day you do it again, and you're like, no, I want to go back. And, but I always saw that what he was saying, he was always consistent with. Like, he would always get up early, and he would always do the training before everyone was awake, because family was important. And watching him, observing him the way he was with me, I knew, like, by the time I was 13 years old, I knew that I wanted to be a father. And I knew that I wanted to be a father like my father was to me. Like, at 13, I was thinking, man, I can't wait until I'm a dad, because I want to do the same things my dad did with me. So I was already excited because of the relationship we had built, to build that kind of relationship with my kids. And I'm trying. I'm working at it, right? So far, it has been pretty amazing. If you ask them what, the last few times that they've been asked, what do you love doing with me? And their answer very often is going on adventures. And I've been instilling this idea of adventures since they were little, as the possibility of the unknown, the curiosity of what's around the next corner. So I'll take them camping, I'll take them for hikes, but I'll also say, hey, let's go walk to the grocery store, which is, since they were little, it's a mile away, and we would just walk with like a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old by the hand, and we just walk. Okay, what do we see? There's iguanas next to the canal. You know, obviously you got to be careful, all these cars. You know, oh, there's a guy in a motorcycle. How cool is that? You know, they'll be like, oh, wow, that's so cool. Or there'll be a huge truck. Wow, look at that, right? So this wonder, not losing this wonder. And then we would go to the grocery store, not to buy groceries, to buy a loaf of bread. And then we'd eat the loaf of bread on the way back. That was it. That was it. It was just to walk there, to grab a loaf of bread and come back. And it would take about, 40 minutes to an hour. But in that 40 minutes to an hour, we were experiencing something. And while my father didn't put it in those terms, that's how I lived with him. Because it was always, I never knew what the heck he was going to have us do. And he was always game for anything too. There's a period in my life where I got really into rollerblading and like doing tricks on ramps and rails and all that stuff. And I told him, and he's like, let's build a half pipe. We built a half pipe in my backyard. My mom wasn't happy. So this 8-foot half pipe. And I was the one that knew how to do it. But he, you know, because I was on rollerblades, he learned how to rollerblade too. And, you know, we would go and rollerblade. He wasn't jumping off stuff, but when we built the half pipe, he's like, I got to try this. So after I, you know, kind of mastered it, I told him, I said, okay, well, he asked me, how do you roll in from the top? I said, well, you got to go, you got to lean forward, and you got to keep your weight back on your feet. Like you got to push your feet back as you tip forward so that your weight stays against the ramp and you're able to go down. He's like, okay. And he's an engineer, so the spatial stuff he gets, but he tipped too far forward. He went face first, sliding down the entire thing. And my mom already didn't like the fact that that thing was there. She definitely didn't like the fact that he was trying it. But when he got up and his whole face is bloody because he just skidded his entire face down, he looked at me, he goes, is it bad? And I looked at him, I'm like, he goes, do you think your mom's going to notice? I'm like, oh yeah. So that's what I say. Like, even though he was my father, he also was like my dad. Even though he was my father, he was like a good friend because we would always do things together. But he was always there to lend the perspective. He rarely told me what to do. He would always ask me, what do you think about this? Have you thought about this? And so I learned a lot through that I now have taken with me as a father and as a coach too. To ask a question is often more valuable than to give an answer.
Perfectly said. Such a great story. Just the you know, I love listening to that, and you can see this sort of, you know, this is going to be released on audio, but for those of you listening, like I'm seeing Armando on the screen as we're talking, and it's just his face is lit up as he tells the story. It's really beautiful. The final thing I wanted to touch on really is more context specific for what we're going through now with the pandemic, and we started with that at the beginning, you know, talking about the shift of your business online. But I was wondering about kind of the impact playing out for you now that your family is completely homebound, as mine is. And we've been experiencing some real highs of connectedness, and we've been experiencing some real lows of kind of the pressure cooker of being all together in this kind of space without really much outlet at the moment. And I'm just wondering how that's playing out in your family. What are you, how are you living this kind of confinement that's been enforced on us?
Well, it is difficult. I think if you have kids that were not homeschooled and now they're home the entire day, it's not just because they're home on the weekends and it's not an issue. But now what's happened is the teachers have essentially sent a full load as if we don't have anything to do. And now we're expected to be a full-time teacher to the same degree, right? We're always teaching, but it's a very different thing when you've opted to say, I'm going to homeschool, because now you can create your curriculum and how you want it to fit and how you want to do this. We don't have that choice. Now it's being given. And so there's a massive amount of work that they're sending. And I have 3 kids. So all 3 of them are getting, and we're trying to juggle that. And so now what's happened is like Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays are my days to see my clients. And my wife is the homeschool teacher. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, she sees her clients. And I'm the homeschool teacher. And so now we kind of relay race and, okay, great, your turn, and go like that. So we've had to create systems and shift people to be able to serve both our kids and our clients. And I think part of the biggest stress is not having control of the education, and very often being fed a lot of stuff that perhaps is not necessary. It's just filler. And that's a problem for us because time is of high value. And if we're going to do something with them, let's make sure that we're addressing the things that matter most, because these are very different times. And I think that's been one of the bigger things, is us being able to get clear on what are the things that matter most in this whole transition, because no one that is living today has really experienced this global phenomenon that we're experiencing. Like that, it's happened in history, but never globally. Because even when we had the H1N1, even when we had the swine flu, there were pockets. It wasn't the entire world. This is the first time that there's an entire world stopped. And it was a conversation we've had with the kids, because they were like, oh, like my daughter's birthday is tomorrow. She's like, oh, can I go? Can I see my cousins? Can I do this? And it's like, you need to understand that we can't plan ahead. We don't know what's going to happen. Like, this has never happened in our lifetime. It's not like hurricanes. Like we live here in Miami, in South Florida. We know that there's hurricane season every year. We know when there's a hurricane, what we need to do. And sometimes it's damage, like it creates damage, but we know the steps. And there's other people that are fine. Here, the world is essentially at a standstill, kind of waiting and seeing how things are going. And it's shifted the economy of everything, the way we communicate, the way we experience everything, because there's a lot of people confined. We are not on full lockdown, which is really helpful because we can take the kids outside. What we can't do is convene in groups, and they've unfortunately locked out all the parks and everything. So those spaces are off limits. But I know that there are lots of people that are physically confined to their house, or worse, if you're in an apartment, because at least if you're confined to your house, if you have a backyard, you have something.
Right.
If you're confined to an apartment, like you're indoors pretty much all day. And that wreaks havoc on your mental state, your health. It's actually a worse thing for you because you're not getting sun, you're not getting fresh air. So kind of circling back to your original question was, there's no precedent for anything that's happening right now. So we're having to roll with the punches. And I think while there's a lot of bad happening, a lot of people dying, people sick, suffering, there's the economic that's going to last for another year or two. I believe it's going to last probably another year or two, the effects of it, if not more. There are a lot of opportunities too. So we're trying to create opportunities mentally, physically, and emotionally for our family to capitalize and be in a better place to be able to serve others and to create things of value that can help others.
Beautifully said. I really appreciate those insights, Armando, and everything that you shared today. It's been such a great conversation. Thank you for taking the time and for sharing your story and your wisdom. My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's always great to have these conversations with you. You're very welcome. And if people want to find out more about you, where do they go? I would say if you want to check out the book, The Legacy Code, go to legacycodebook.com. There are some interviews on there. There are synopses. There's some things that you can look at even before you purchase the book. It has a link. You can purchase it on Amazon. If you're the type of person that you've been struggling with pain for a while, I would encourage you to go to Cruz, C-R-U-Z, country.com. And on the home page is a registration for a presentation that we put together. It's 37 minutes. But if you've been suffering from pain, that's something that you can now start getting educated in understanding pain and how to eliminate it right away by understanding these 6 components of what makes up pain and optimizes health at the same time. So that's what I would encourage you to do. Just go there, opt in to that seminar, to the little registration, and you can watch it whenever you want. But I highly recommend it if you're in pain to do something like that. And then I'm on social media. So fantastic. Well, we'll put the links in the show notes as well. But it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks again. My pleasure. Thank you so much, man.